John, I'd like you to lead off by telling us what the ransomware situation was like going into last year.
What we've seen is cyber insurance companies are really being hit with losses as a result of the data you see here on the screen. 50% of companies experienced an attack last year. 73% had their data encrypted. Now these lead to losses as companies suffer downtime, as they pay ransoms to recover from these things. I mean, this is exactly what the cyber insurance industry is seeing and why we're having this conversation. The sophistication has gone up so much, and that has made these phishing emails very hard to spot, and they only have to succeed one time in order to achieve their goals. That's the insidious thing about this. They can try a million different things. They only have to succeed once to break through your defenses and encrypt your data and cause you to incur a loss. And those losses are huge. We've seen the average cost of an attack rise to $761,000 in 2020. So not only are the attacks getting more sophisticated, but they're also getting more frequent. And of course, what the bad news that comes out of that is the global cost of ransomware also has increased significantly. And this is what's really causing the cyber insurance industry to take notice, and why it's so important that this be a C-level conversation, because this affects the entire business.
RAS, or Ransomware-as-a-Service, has revolutionized the art of extortion, right? Criminals and nation states are creating this incredibly complex ransomware code, and they're licensing it for a fee to would-be attackers, and sometimes sharing in the ransom payment. And what this does effectively is it places costly, very complex and effective ransomware in the hands of anyone willing to pay for it, and really allows for a true fire and forget attack by nearly anyone. Data exfiltration, this is really the true double whammy, right? So not only are your important files potentially being imprisoned with encryption, they're stealing your data and threatening to publicly post it, including your sensitive HR data, your compensation data, if you don't pay the ransom. So you really have to assume that your data has been exfiltrated or stolen when you receive that ransom demand. And just remember, where there's money to be made, people are going to get involved, and these are lucrative attack vectors. And not only are they going to continue, but they're going to get worse. U.S. Treasury has recently warned U.S. companies that paying a ransom could bring civil or criminal penalties for sanctions violations. Some of these organizations that are engaged in these ransom extortions are based in countries that are falling under U.S. sanctions. So it really puts you between a rock and a hard place, because paying a ransom is considered a viable option in some of these cases. But the FBI has recommended that victims not pay ransoms for lots of different reasons. Because if you pay a ransom, obviously there's no guarantee that you'd recover your files. There's no guarantee that your data won't be publicly posted. And honestly, there's an argument that can be made that payments of ransoms and ransomware attacks only increases the risk of future attacks. Regulators are going to be very interested in the due diligence that a company has done in the wake of a breach. So you're subject to enforcement actions, obviously, and fines if you're found negligent or not having performed due diligence to make sure that your cybersecurity program is meeting your risk objectives and appetites. And finally, number three, we've all gone through these third-party risk management questionnaires that are given to us by companies that we want to do business with. Companies, they're going to judge the program's efficacy, make sure that your cybersecurity program is meeting their requirements, really as a condition of doing business. Cybersecurity really in the past couple of years has become if not the top operational risk that many large companies are trying to manage through. And it's important to understand that CISOs and their organizations aren't responsible for this threat all by themselves. I think the most important thing I learned in my experience demonstrated in my past is that we've got to keep our boards engaged, right? We've got to educate our board of directors. We've got to make sure they understand what the true risk is. And the boards have to take an active role in overseeing cyber risk management. In the US, especially in the financial services sector, a lot of our regulators are demanding exactly that. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's giving these board fiduciaries skin in the game to make sure that they're following through on their responsibilities to manage risk in their organizations. And cyber risk is only going to get more complex and more pernicious. It's also important to educate the boards on the risks of ransomware because of the prevalence of the attacks associated with it. And maybe even more important, it'll save you a lot of grief if you're able to educate them on the features and limitations of your cyber policy. Things like coverages, exclusions, which can be very tricky, retention amounts, which may change over time. Retentions are the deductibles that your company will pay if you file a claim.
We've had numerous conversations with customers on this exact topic because it's such a hot topic right now. It's driving immense interest in finding solutions to this problem, not just talking around how do we store our data, but how do we make sure that stored data is protected? Well, one way you can protect your data is by making it immutable. You make it unchangeable, so a ransomware attack cannot encrypt your data. And that act of making your data immutable or unchangeable has become something the cyber insurance industry is very aware of as a really potent way of preventing attacks and defending your data and preventing having to pay ransom. So we've seen cyber insurance companies going to our customers and saying, you need to do this. And that's something we're seeing over and over again. As an example, one major real estate financial firm was required to have 6 months of immutable data in order to renew their policy. So without having 6 months of immutable data, the insurance company didn't want to cover them at all because their data is very sensitive, right? They're encrypting that data, exfiltrating that data could cause such loss that they just didn't want to cover them at all. So that was a requirement. The good news is we are hearing customers saying they're getting discounts if they have immutable storage in place. As an example, a Fortune 500 energy firm reported to us that they got a 15% discount on their insurance by having immutable storage in place. So cyber insurance companies are becoming aware of the risk and also the things you can do from a technology standpoint to prevent it.
The 3-2-1 rule briefly around enterprise backup just says that if you really want your data to be safe, you need to have 3 copies of that data. It can't all be sitting on the same kind of media, so that if you have some kind of a media issue, a bad firmware update, whatever, you don't lose your backup data too. So at least 2 different types of media. And for disaster recovery, 1 copy should be off-site, especially given the nature of cyber threats that we're increasingly dealing with now. Veeam and Cloudian also recommend what we call the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, the backup zip code. That one, the second one, is an immutable copy of your data. So make sure that you've got at least 1 copy that's air-gapped, it's immutable, it's on, for example, immutable Cloudian storage. And if you're protecting your data, make sure that you've got a way to go through the kind of readiness exercises that Gil mentioned. That's what the 0 refers to, and make sure you can really get it back if you need to test the accuracy of your backups. So I'm going to turn things over now to John to talk through what the Veeam Cloudian solution looks like around immutability in particular.
This is a completely automated workflow built into the standard Veeam backup workflow using Cloudian Hyperstore as the backup target. We have the ability with this S3 compatible feature called Object Lock to make that data unchangeable for a set period of time. So you can think of it like a time lock on a bank vault. And until that timeout has lapsed, that data you stored is unchangeable and cannot be deleted. And this is, as I said, happening as part of a standard backup workflow. So it's a 4-step process. Backup your data using Veeam with Cloudian as the backup target. The Veeam software then applies the object lock policy. And at that point, ransomware cannot change it, and you have a clean copy for restore. And this is all handled as part of the Veeam workflow. So there's no additional intervention required, and that's what makes this so powerful. One additional point on this, in addition to the object lock solution, and you mentioned this, Gil, as well, the data can be encrypted purposefully. You can encrypt your data on the Cloudian device to prevent exfiltration, so that if you store your data and you encrypt it as part of that storing process, that data cannot be exfiltrated and used against you. It's now protected as well.